What in the thing is thingly? What is the thing in itself? We should not reach the thing in itself until our thinking has first reached the thing as a thing. This is a quote by Martin Heidegger. What follows are fragments of thoughts, or rather thoughts revibrated back into thought, into writing, into what constitutes the general aspects of things, material and immaterial. There is writing as writing, and there is writing as thinking. Both operate differently. The former, laborious, institutional, dead. The latter, instantaneous, without inhibition, alive. Escalators are mechanical steps, stairways, staircases, to and from certain destinations. The motor that drives them is remote, hidden, removed from the horizon of vertical oscillation. Yet, that does not stop me from stepping on them, stepping into them, laying my feet upon them. I trust the motor, the general apparatus, the belt that takes me up and down. Oscillation is essentially a swing, a sliding from point A to point B and back again until infinity. To write is itself to oscillate, to see all the seas at once, to prefabricate our participatory interventions in and of worldly events. Or rather, should we look at writing in its twofold manner? Just as the motor belt that drives the escalator up and down in and of itself moves in one direction, just to later turn 100 degrees and move to the complete other direction. And still, though the belt goes first in one direction and then in the other direction, the people being transported on the escalator proceed in a linear fashion towards their so-called destination. What is the destination? The movement between two or more polar entities always embodies an essence of lying somewhere in the middle. A writing process can potentially be traced to include itself within such a movement. If and when such an oscillation becomes apparent, it destabilizes writing as writing and turns it into something it is not, something alien to itself, forcing writing to take a look in the mirror. When writing takes that look in the mirror, it resembles to a large extent the myth of Medusa, the horrific realization that writing is and never will be finished, that in fact it is determined never to end, never to conclude, never to settle down. It is therefore comparable to a doubly planned fall, for we already know that to walk is in fact to fall continuously. Riding the escalator becomes an eternally suspended fall, mobilized via the concealed motor belt. Being transmitted by an unseen entity from point A to point B may allow us a second sight of what might have escaped our instantaneous locus of attention. We can observe in the phenomenon of the escalator a back and fro movement that produces an advance for the passenger in its desired destination. The invention of the escalator is both a specifically functional invention, a certain discovery, and at the same time an invention of invention itself, in the sense that what is being advanced here is advancing itself. If faith is said to be able to move mountains, the escalator creates both its own moving mountain and at the same time its potential mountaineer. Oscillation, the determination to reach a point by never reaching a point. Though one can concentrate one's efforts in consciousness on various forms of one or two-sidedness, the activity of constantly, time and again, reaching the gap, of lapsing the unlapsed, of resonating and vibrating in the midst of voidish territories, brings one closer to oneself, and decenters the predominant worldview of happily ever after. For to nest in the middle path, in the in-between, takes courage, a certain amount of equanimity, and practice. A practice that reveals that there is another, more fruitful path, always already awaiting, always already there, always demanding no effort or predisposition, in which one can find true happiness. We can imagine an escalator as being a conveyor belt between two different states of consciousness. On the one hand, the lower level, and on the other hand, a progression or pro-motion of the first state. Clinging to one side or the other is not possible, for to effectively ascend or descend, one has to let go of whatever is anchoring him or her at either pole of the apparatus. One is discovering within motion something terribly important, that in order to move, one has to let go, to transport by means of a transformation. Breathing, inhaling, exhaling, transporting the breath through the body, taking in, breathing out, the body lifting, the body collapsing, breathing in, breathing out, effortlessly, for we are already always breathing, always writing, writing as breathing, writing effortlessly, writing in the moment of the moment. That is the practice of not writing whilst writing, of being there and then not being there, and the being somewhere else, somewhere so near that to write about it would demand a certain distance, which is alien to true writing. Much in the same way as thinking about thinking is alien to true thought. For to write, or to breathe, or to think are actions that in their purest form leave no trace. This may sound contradictory, especially as regards to writing, but one has to clearly and closely become aware of what one does when one writes. For it is not a matter of leaving a record, a trace, or a report on the current state of things, but in fact it is an action similar to erasure, but not an erasure as opposed to marking something. It is an erasure that holds within itself the methods of its own disposition, its own constituting force. To write, therefore, is to focus one's attention on the ungraspable, on the non-existent fact. And to focus on this non-existence is to know the formless, to see the invisible, to apprehend what consciousness itself is made of. And the knowledge or wisdom that arrives and resonates is always already formless, and thus has no trace itself. For only forms can leave traces, only forms can demand a conceptual apprehension of themselves. The formless requires nothing, it demands nothing. It is simply there, nowhere. If we were to draw a map from here to nowhere, we would encounter a threshold beyond which such an action loses its meaning. We could try to pursue such an action, but what will be encountered is simply the place in which thought turns into non-thought, writing into non-writing, direction switching into attitude. And therefore the way to and fro such a place is never completely accomplished. It is like trying to draw a line between the center of a page on one of its sides and the center of the page on the other side, without turning the page or lifting the writing tool. Writing in this way becomes a form of meditation, of starting something without the knowledge of what you will encounter along the way. One can only attend to whatever is rising in the process. And this attending, this coming to meet one's own writing, is a meeting that never takes place, and therefore never leaves a mark, but only unfolds as an experience one can fully become aware of, and yet never reach a finite point. Again, we come back to oscillation. For to oscillate is to never reach a finite point, at least not on paper, but only perhaps in our own mind and in our hearts. Back to writing, back to breathing, back to oscillating, escalating. Something is coming back. There is an element of going somewhere and coming back, going into space and coming back to space. A backspace as such. If I look at the backspace key on the keyboard, it is just above the letter, the enter key on the keyboard. If I were to press on the enter key now, my writing would appear in a lower line in this text. If I were to press the backspace button now, you would experience the word now as no. What would that mean? Now is no longer now. How does this shed light on our experience of writing and reading? When entering the space of writing, we will encounter a vast field of nothingness.
Ohad, just a second. May you say in a few things what you want to say? Just, just what you are talking about. Just, just the main idea. Just in short, just without reading, just tell us how, like to the human being, just we are just friends all here.
I will do that.
What do you want to say?
I will do that when I finish reading the text, because part of it is also reading the text. It's
Yeah,
about reading and writing.
Imagine that you already finished to read it.
I can't imagine, because I have to read it in order
Did
for
you read it before, no?
It didn't take place here. It has to take place.
But for whom you are doing this?
For myself.
Okay, if you do yourself. Yeah, I will be here in a minute.
That's okay.
While you complete.
One encounters the flat and empty page or screen when one enters a space of writing. There's an openness to nothing, to the empty page, to the whiteness of the white. The existence of the backspace key on the writing pad reminds us that one step forward might as well be one step backwards, or in fact, make us become aware of the dialectical parameters of the field of writing being mapped out or navigated in. The writing pad, like other similar modern inventions, contains within itself the methods to its own negation. While the writing pad is supposed to be a tool that promotes writing in the positivist sense of accumulating marks, the backspace is the antithesis to the movement of writing, for it decreases this accumulation and in a sense subverts it. That is why perhaps when we think of a real writer, what comes to mind is someone using a typewriter, typing into the night in a single-minded direction without any trace of inhibition within the writing machine itself. But just the sound and tempo of the typewriter, both harmonic and contingent entities. Generally speaking, corrections were difficult to be made in the writing movement that using a typewriter dictates. Therefore, one was more free to immerse oneself in the field of writing itself, and perhaps find a second level or space opening up. Take a simple example. If I were to go into the sea and start swimming, I would have within me already the idea of some kind of shore I have come from or am going towards. This idea of shore implies a space, perhaps in front or in the back of my mind. If it is a front space or back space does not matter. What matters is that there is a second level or realm different from the one an individual finds himself within a given moment. And the second level or second state of consciousness is similar to the point from which we emerge but different in vibration and magnitude. Therefore, the idea of oscillation or escalating is necessary if one wishes to understand the vibratory experience taking place here or there in everyday life. To go to and from space, to come back and go again to a certain destination, to go into and come out of a state of awareness is the constituting movement of coming to meet one's own self, one's own self. For example, if one were to commute from point A to point B within any given metropolis today using the public transport, one is surely to pass between two or more different states of velocity and inertia. Sitting and then standing up, standing and then walking, walking and then stopping again to look, looking and then turning one's head back and forth for orientation, standing and boarding an escalator and then continuing to walk, walking and then stopping again at any given physical or architectural obstacle, and so on and so forth. We can view these transitions as transitions between different spaces and levels or stages of awareness within a day-night cycle, a constant state of transition that manifests gradually. Therefore, the idea of progression, or the encounter with the self, can also be understood to occur gradually at every point of this encounter. One is encountered with the present continuum, a present that unfolds, and when the present unfolds in a gradual manner, we meet the idea of differentiation, and there we also meet similitude. And where one meets both differentiation and similitude, one encounters the self in its original mode. The escalator feeling something. It feels something now. It is being stepped on. I am the escalator. I am the oscillating escalator. To go into the object in order to acquire a sense of self whilst upon the object. Do objects have a sense of self? Why not? After all, is the self not the center of our universe? And is something that is at the center of our universe not existent in all? Self, the word strikes me. Self-wisdom, self-knowledge, know thyself. If I am an escalator, can I know myself? What if I am an escalator? What if my essence is escalating? I am escalating, I am an escalator. I have been oscillating and now I've reached the point of escalating. So oscillation is a medium on the way towards escalation. The oscillating escalator arrives at its essence. It is an escalator. It is escalating. It escalates towards openness, towards inwards and outwards, towards the great big ocean, towards the great white page, towards the next level, the level of self-realization, self-knowing, self-writing itself. The self writes itself. The self writes. I am writing. I am whatever you want me to be. I can be an escalator, I can be the writer, I can be myself, I can be you, I can be me, I can be free. When taking an escalator up or down, movement is being played out. The passengers on the escalator take upon their roles as movers, as people in motion, as passengers. But is their movement really leading them somewhere? Are they really being transported from one place to the other? Or is this movement just another performance of daily reality? Perhaps it is exactly this phenomenon that is so fascinating about the escalator. The image of an escalator full of people embarked on it holds within itself the clue to its deception. For escalators are in their basis a static object. They are static stairs that move. And for that reason, in many languages, escalator means moving stairs. But are these stairs really moving? How could they? After all, they are only stairs. Stairs do not move. Stairs simply are. What moves in any way we look at it is us. The stairs stay in their place, in the same relative position throughout the whole movement of the whole conveyor belt. They may appear to be moving, but that is only when we forget about the position of one stair in itself in relation to its other neighboring stairs, and the entire chain as a whole. In fact, they are never moving. What moves or shifts is our perspective of them. Our view of them, they remain exactly in the same place throughout their so-called movement from up and down, top to bottom. And so do we. The passenger does not usually move when on an escalator. It's one more paragraph. The passenger is a passenger. He passes, but passing here does not require movement, for if one were to stand still on an escalator, one could also be regarded as a passenger. Just as we are called passenger when riding in the train or flying an airplane to the other side of the world. We pass, we board, we start in one place and end up in another, but we never really move. One could say the motor moves, but that also is not true. The motor or engine orientates. It displays a gesture of movement, but this is far from real moving. To say it in simpler terms, movement does not exist. Time does not exist. The separate stairs of this moving staircase are like still images or photographs that are being projected onto our retina or into our sense of gravitation. One can imagine the moving staircase as a cinema, with the moving stairs being like moving images, each stair a separate frame, yet when experienced as a whole, all the stairs are experienced like a movie. Just as the movement suggested by the moving picture is illusionary, so is the movement suggested by the escalator an invention of our minds. And it is of no surprise that both motion pictures with sound as a cultural invention and the escalator were exposed to the general public exactly at the same event, which is the Exposition Universelle in Paris in 1900. There is surely some element of magic in the idea of escalators, and one could say even romance. Every embarking is like a little fairy tale that you know will end fine, if only you remember to step off them at the right moment. And here we meet the idea of the right moment that we know or recognize so well from photography or even cinema. The moment here would be the moment of ascending and descending the moving staircase, the moment of going from a passive movement to an active movement, from passivity to activity, from just passing to taking action, acting. And is this not the real moment that is encapsulated in the photographic apparatus? The moment of moving from grasping, from wanting to hold on to a present experience, and moving on to the next moment. The moment of letting go of the moment. The letting go of this camera shutter, the letting go of the past and embarking on the present continuum, on an oscillating escalator.